How many of you have laid down in bed at night, scrolled through your phone, and ultimately, at one point, dropped your phone on your face? And how many of you, no matter how many times you do it, will continue to hold your phone over your face in bed? Short of some traumatic experience happening between the phone and your face, the likelihood that you'll continue to do this and take the consequences is probably high. But is that really the best solution? I'm here today to tell you a little bit about how the way we consume social media is a lot like our own ignorance in continuing to drop phones on our faces. Now, I want to preface this with the fact that I'm not an advocate for the abolition of social media. In fact, I make a living off of it. To go even further, I make a living off of helping other people make a living off of social media. I've worked in this space for close to 8 years, and just last year, started my own consultancy working with professional sports teams on how to turn their social media channels into revenue generators. In a similar light, I also work with influencers on driving home authentic solutions to bring value to brands and also ensuring they're asking for what they're worth. In short, I help content creators touch millions of people and generate millions of dollars through the content that they distribute. So I'm certainly not going to be here giving you a lecture about how the best solution is to put our phones down. That being said, what I have found from being incredibly involved in the industry over the last few years is that social media's impact on mental health can be pretty devastating. If we don't become more aware of the various symptoms and outcomes that are potential to us and our mental health through using these platforms, we're going to be our own demise. A few short years ago, I took a trip to the North Cascades in Washington and found myself without internet access for close to 2 weeks. Admittingly, it was pretty difficult to do at first. I could feel the sense of withdrawals as I habitually picked up my phone, went to scroll through Instagram, only to be faced with those terrorizing words, "No internet connection." A few days later, though, I found myself relaxed and fully present. And with that came a sense of clarity, creativity, and a desire to actually do more. The profound impact the disconnect had on me and my life made me realize that this digital world, which I loved and felt so passionate about, was actually holding me back from a lot of positive things in my life. And it's not just me. The more I looked at the research, the more I found out that millennials and Generation Z were at an increased risk for mental health issues directly correlated to their use on these platforms, associated with body image, self-esteem, depression, or anxiety, as they were using these platforms. In fact, amongst leading platforms, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Snapchat, Twitter, the only one of these platforms to have positive impact on mental health was YouTube. Why? If we bring it back to user behavior, the only one of these platforms where we're actively choosing the content we want to consume is on YouTube, because we search for it. All other platforms, we're giving consent to these news feeds to rely on the algorithms to deliver information to us, or we are seeing content that these platforms are financially motivated to deliver to us. In both cases, though, we're consuming content every single day that these platforms are telling us to, and it's not even our choice. So, why is this important? 2.95 billion people are active on social media around the world. 2.6 on Facebook alone. That's roughly 1/3 of the world's population that are using social media that's having negative side effects on mental health. We live in a world that has never, ever been more connected than it is today. And yet, we are facing one of the most startling rates of loneliness our world has ever seen. How the heck aren't we seeing this as epidemic? So all of this challenged me to tackle the question, how do we make change? Do we point fingers at the platforms? Do we follow what's seemingly the best advice presented to date and following the fads of disconnecting? Maybe. I know it certainly worked for me, but it wasn't sustainable as somebody who needs to continue to work in this space. And I think that all of us, whether you're involved in the digital space or not, will find the same issue. If you think about it, everything from our family connections to our photo albums to our event invites to our file sharing to our workplace relationships, they're all ignited and sustained through these platforms. The solution needs to start with us. And it's not all that complex. For years, we've gravitated towards becoming conscious consumers of the products that we purchase. We do everything from buy local to using reusable grocery bags to carpooling our way to work, all with the end goal of having a positive footprint on this world through small, independent actions. So what would happen if we took the same principle and applied it to how we consume information online? What would happen if we thought twice about how content was making us feel? What about if we thought about the channels that we're following? What if we put controls up in place to monitor our screen time and galvanize us into thinking about the why of our never-ending scrolls? So today, I present to you 3 steps to getting back on track. The first step is identification. So if you're anything like me, you probably find it pretty difficult to get through watching an entire movie without picking up your phone. Or perhaps you're one of those people who nervously reach for your phone after just 5 seconds of silence within your group of friends. Or how about when your birthday comes along and you're hyper aware of who did and did not post on your wall? And God forbid you text or email somebody and have yet to receive a response, but then they post something online, so you know they've been online since you last reached out. I know we've all been there. I have no shame in my Insta game. That being said, we're here to tackle solutions. So, if you resonate with anything that I just said, I'd like to welcome you to the club. There's roughly 2.95 billion of us who've probably felt one or all of the above at some point in time, and you've just completed the first step to finding a solution. The second step is assessment. So once we know how obsessive, possessive, and paranoid these platforms are making us feel, the next step is to be mindful enough to do something about it. Are you somebody who goes to bed at 9 o'clock p.m., but you still find yourself lost in the vortex of the scroll by 11 o'clock? Are you also somebody who then wakes up the next morning wishing you had gotten more sleep? Assess that situation and revise your behavior accordingly. There is no need for us to be losing 2 hours of our day consuming content that's of little importance to us or that can trigger us when we're already exhausted. Time and circumstance of how we consume this information makes all the difference. Most of the time, we don't even draw a correlation between how we're using our devices to the moods that we're in. I'm somebody who's constantly saying I'm busy or getting frustrated with how perpetually busy I feel, and yet have to call BS on myself because I'm also completely caught up in all of my friends' Insta stories. Think about it for a second. We spend too much time throughout the week lost in the scrolls so that when our friends and family actually reach out to hang out in person, we have to decline because we wasted too much time that week on social media as opposed to just getting shit done. For most of us, the impact social media will have on our mental health won't even register with us until we take the time to step back and be more intentional about how we do and do not use these apps. So aside from some of these conscious elements, which take time and practice to master, there are a few other quick tips you can use to assess your need for recalibration. So try downloading an app that can monitor your screen time. I claim back hours, yes, hours of my day through this practice alone. Or try making your bedroom a no-phone zone. This establishes healthy boundaries between you and your devices at a time that should be more about real connection and sleep. One of the other things I found I was doing a lot of was habitually picking up my phone and going into an app and getting lost in the newsfeed without any real purpose. So now, I've placed limitations on myself whereby I can't open up an app until I've stated what purpose I have for going into it. So it's kind of like that search model approach. This ensures my consumption is by choice and therefore more intentional based on how I feel at that point in time. It's important to note that the boundaries we're establishing for ourselves within this phase are also the boundaries we're establishing for other people and how they communicate with us. Before you want to say that any of the above is impossible based on your career or personal circumstance, ensure you take the time to step into the role and play devil's advocate with yourself and see if the only thing coming between you and your ability to implement any of this is simply your mindset. If we can't consume content that is meant to be motivational or aspirational, but instead allow it to feed our inadequacy, then we don't belong consuming the content in the first place. The last step is maintenance. So once we've identified the issue and we navigate our way through the maze of staying conscious in our behavior, how do we maintain it? As social media changes, our strategy will need to as well. Maintenance may look different to you next month, next year, or 5 years from now. But don't become stagnant in your practices, because as soon as you do, these platforms are sure to introduce a new feature to you designed to pull you back in. Ensure you approach each new feature with intention on how you want to use it to best serve you and your values. Of course, maybe things won't change, and you'll grow completely complacent on where you are with your new habits. But maintenance, it's not a static state. It kind of feels mundane and gets to a point where you no longer feel the positive influences you originally felt, but that's exactly when you should be challenging yourself to fill that time and space with things that truly matter to you. You probably fail, and that's okay. Just like adopting new gym routines or using that flip-in reusable grocery bag, it's not gonna happen all the time. You'll slip up, you'll fall back into the vortex, and that's okay. These platforms are designed with addictive tendencies in mind. They know you love the feeling of a new notification, and they'll do everything they can to deliver that to you. The point of it all is how quickly will we allow ourselves to get back on track when we slip up. These 3 steps are not without their flaws, but it's also important to note that this is a fairly new area for us to be exploring. We're constantly going to have to be revisiting the identify and assess stages on our way to maintaining our new habits. It's our responsibility as content consumers to drive change here. As someone who steps into the role of content creators on a regular basis, I know that they are 100% motivated in their marketing strategies by your behavior on these platforms. Brands are 100% driven in their marketing strategies by your behavior on these platforms. So just as we see with support local or buy ethical movements, the more we start to reward and consume only content that inspires and educates, provides humor, or challenges us to think differently, the more we'll start to see a shift in how the types of content that's coming out from these brands and influencers look differently. And not to follow the oh-so-trendy topic of mindfulness, but I think that's exactly the solution that's necessary here. Anything we can do to remain aware of our daily mannerisms while using these platforms will ultimately impact how we feel at the end of the day. This is a scenario where one small shift could create substantial change. And just like with any movement, the greatest impact will come from all of us working in tandem to make that small change. We could continue to drop phones on our faces for the rest of our lives, or next time, make the conscious decision to turn on our sides while we scroll.